In Dublin, 2003, a teenager vanished after leaving evening classes. 16-year-old Fiona Kelleher never arrived home. Her phone calls went unanswered. Her bag was left behind, and her keys were logged into evidence with no context. Police filed the disappearance as a runaway and moved on. The family did not. They mapped bus routes, searched canals, and demanded records through official letters. For years, silence answered them back. Then, in 2008, an anonymous note arrived. Blue ink on lined paper, with directions only a local would know. It was not the last. Each letter dragged the relatives deeper, until one detail led them to a sealed cellar beneath a forgotten house. Inside, answers waited that the state had overlooked. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from today. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. The day had ended as it always did. Streets busy with buses, students carrying books home, commuters crowding pavements under the orange haze of Dublin lamps. Yet by 9 p.m. on that October evening in 2003, the routine fractured inside the Kelleher home. 16-year-old Fiona had not come through the door. Her mother stood at the kitchen sink, listening for footsteps. Her father sat by the phone, dialing repeatedly, marking each unanswered attempt in a notepad. At 9:15 p.m., the family's caller ID showed 3 outgoing attempts. At 9:30 p.m., voicemail activated, her recorded voice playing and replaying until her mother hung up in frustration. At 10 p.m., her father took the car and drove the usual route, past the community center, along the Grand Canal, across bridges slick with rain. But headlights revealed nothing. The route was silent. The following morning, a groundskeeper found Fiona's satchel behind the community center. It contained textbooks, a plastic bottle half filled with water, and her set of house keys. The items were handed to the Gardaí, catalogued at 8:45 a.m. An evidence sheet recorded bag, contents, school books, water, keys. Chain of custody intact. But no notation explained why the bag had been left in plain sight. The Garda officer who responded logged a brief report. His assessment: possible runaway. No immediate search was authorized. A supervisor signed off. The Kelleher family refused that explanation. Fiona had attended her classes faithfully, returned home each night, followed the same bus route without variation. Nothing in her pattern suggested she would vanish willingly. By 2 p.m. that same day, Fiona's father requested a canvass order for surrounding streets. The officer noted his request in the logbook but marked the action unnecessary at this time. No door-to-door interviews were conducted beyond 2 businesses facing the community center. The family began their own inquiry. That evening, Fiona's younger brother borrowed a stack of posters from a missing persons group and added his sister's photograph. He printed the family's phone number in thick black marker beneath. They taped them to poles, bus shelters, and fences, the ink still wet in the drizzle. At 9:15 p.m. that night, the family retraced her final known steps. They stood at the bus stop where she was last reported, the pavement slick, the light overhead dim. No witnesses stepped forward. Later that week, the Gardaí released a still frame from a CCTV camera at the bus depot. The timestamp: 8:35 p.m., October 14th, 2003. The blurry image showed Fiona standing near the barrier, her bag slung at her side. She did not board a bus. Behind the fence, 2 indistinct figures appeared. The report filed beneath the image read, "Subjects unidentifiable. No further action." The family marked the frame in their notebook. They highlighted the figures in pen, circled them, and wrote, "Who?" in capital letters. The house keys haunted them. Brass edges worn smooth from years of use, attached to a plastic fob with their home address faded nearly white. The set was sealed in a transparent evidence bag, tagged with case number 034471. The family asked repeatedly to see the objects again, convinced some clue might be visible. Each request was denied. Nights stretched into ritual. The kitchen table transformed into a command center. A map of Dublin spread flat, pins marking bus stops, canals, alleys. Fiona's father noted times in pencil. cross-referencing bus timetables. Her mother logged every phone call into a spiral notebook. Calls to hospitals marked in red ink, calls to police marked in blue, calls to relatives in black. The evidence bag remained untouched in police storage, stacked among dozens of other logged items from other cases. Inside the Kelleher house, however, it remained present in every conversation. The absence of action became its own forensic trail. Reports stopped. Canvass efforts never expanded. The official file held only 3 witness notes, 2 patrol sheets, and the single CCTV still. The family refused silence. Each night they re-walked the last route, standing again at the bus stop, staring into shadows beyond the fence. Nothing ever answered. Only her keys remained, tagged and bagged. Winter settled over Dublin, but inside the Kelleher home, the season lost meaning. The calendar on the kitchen wall remained pinned to October 2003, the month Fiona vanished. Her mother refused to turn the page. The Gardaí moved the file to the background. Their note suggested no new leads. The official status hardened. Fiona had likely left by choice. The family pushed back against that label. By November, they had created their own system. Missing posters became their front line. Fiona's father spent evenings in the copy shop, watching machines hum out page after page. The paper curled warm into his hands, the black toner bleeding into grain. Sometimes, in the rush, the image shifted, cutting the top corner to reveal a piece of Fiona's keyring. He stapled those copies to wooden poles anyway, never noticing the detail. Volunteers joined in. Members of a local church, friends of schoolmates, and strangers sympathetic to the story gathered on weekends. They split maps into grids, dividing canals, rail yards, and abandoned warehouses. Each section was labeled with initials and dates. Coffee rings stained the corners, but the handwriting remained clear. Checked, no sign. The Kellehers stored every map. At night, they spread them across the kitchen table, weighing edges with plates and mugs. Red circles marked high-risk areas, canals, alleys, empty lots. Blue ink traced bus routes, following Fiona's path home. On November 6, 2003, volunteers logged a sweep along the Grand Canal. The notes: no unusual items, river level high, visibility low. The initials of 3 volunteers closed the entry. Another log dated December 12th recorded searches of derelict warehouses in the Docklands. Access difficult, interiors empty, no trace. By early 2004, the Gardaí limited their role to monthly check-ins. One officer called at 2 p.m. on January 4th. His notes: spoke with father, no developments. The entry ended without follow-up. The family pressed harder. Fiona's mother created a phone log, a lined notebook that captured every call in meticulous order. Hospitals were marked in red, police contacts in blue, anonymous tips in black. The pages filled quickly. By March, more than 80 numbers were listed. None produced answers. Fiona's brother walked the streets himself, a backpack filled with tape and posters. He stapled them to lampposts and shelters, the rain smudging ink, the paper softening against metal. At one busy junction, 6 different versions layered over each other. The earliest, blurred, with the accidental key in the corner, remained beneath newer copies, half torn yet still visible. By summer 2004, fatigue spread. Volunteers dwindled. Only family members continued nightly searches. Fiona's father updated the maps alone, his pencil circles pressed so hard they cut grooves into paper. In the corner of one sheet, he wrote, "Still missing," underlined 3 times. The case file in official custody remained thin. 3 witness statements, 2 patrol reports, 1 CCTV still. But inside the house, evidence multiplied. Maps folded and unfolded, taped at seams. Phone logs stacked in binders. Posters rolled into tubes, leaned against walls. In June 2005, 2 years after Fiona's disappearance, the family held a vigil at the bus stop. They lit candles along the curb. Wax pooled into shallow puddles. Neighbors placed flowers, but wind carried petals into the canal. Photographs taken that night showed reflections of flames in water, blurred faces in shadows. The Gardaí file did not expand. The evidence locker still held Fiona's satchel and keys, bagged, untouched. The family marked anniversaries with silence. At the table, dinner was replaced with map reviews. Fiona's seat remained empty, her school portrait standing against the wall. 3 years passed, each season indistinguishable from the last. Rain stained the posters, bleaching faces into pale outlines. The ink faded to gray. Pedestrians walked past without noticing. Yet the Kellehers continued. Every night they returned to the maps. Every night they spoke her name aloud. The search logs thinned. The posters curled in rain. By the autumn of 2006, silence had calcified into routine. The Gardaí visited less often. The case file sat in a cabinet, marked inactive. But at the Kelleher home, the work persisted. Fiona's father began to request records formally. He drafted a Freedom of Information request, typed on an old computer, asking for all documents connected to the disappearance. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. Inside, dozens of photocopied pages, patrol logs, witness statements, itemized evidence lists. Most were thin single paragraphs, but one page stood out. It contained a name that had never been mentioned in any prior communication with the family. The page described a witness, Mrs. Hanlon, a shop owner near the community center. Her statement was brief. She had seen a man loitering outside the building at 8 p.m. on the night Fiona vanished. The description was vague, just male, mid-30s, dark jacket. The report ended without follow-up. In the margin, a faint note. No action taken. The Kellehers read it 3 times. They compared it against the CCTV still, the blurred figures beyond the fence. No connection had ever been pursued. The evidence file also included a chain of custody sheet for Fiona's belongings. Bag logged 8:45 a.m., October 15, 2003. Contents listed: books, bottle, keys. Signatures from 2 officers. But under the second signature, the line ended abruptly. No subsequent notes. The bag had simply disappeared into storage, unexamined. At the kitchen table, Fiona's father spread the pages side by side. He highlighted section, underlined words. His wife transcribed them into their spiral notebook. The younger brother pinned the CCTV still next to the witness statement, drawing arrows between blurred figures and the phrase, male, mid-30s. The discovery hardened their resolve. They began writing letters to editors, detailing what the FOIA packet had revealed. They contacted radio stations, giving interviews, reciting the line, "No action taken." The symbolic weight of the keys returned. The evidence list mentioned them, but only in passing. A set of brass keys, tagged and bagged. No photographs taken, no analysis of prints or fibers. Nothing. One evening, Fiona's father drove to the Garda station and asked directly to see the bag again. The desk officer checked the logbook. Entry: Case 034471. Bag in storage, chain intact. Yet when he returned from the evidence room, he shook his head. "Not accessible tonight," he said. The family marked the date and time in their notebook. At home, they drew the keys again. A simple outline on paper, the ring, the fob. They taped the sketch beside the CCTV still, a symbol of absence. In March 2007, another FOIA packet arrived. More photocopied sheets, heavily redacted. But again, the same absence. No follow-up on the loitering man. No detail about the figures behind the fence. No fingerprints lifted from the satchel. Entire investigative steps had simply not been carried out. The family began to suspect intentional neglect. They created their own file, thicker than the Garda's. Every photocopy, every note, every log. The case no longer belonged to the authorities. It belonged to them. Inside the official file, one chain of custody broke. By 2008, frustration had hardened into a campaign. The Kelleher family no longer waited for the Gardaí. They went to newspapers. A local journalist agreed to review their private file. He studied the FOIA packets, the missing follow-ups, the thinness of the official investigation. Within weeks, Fiona's story reappeared in headlines. Family accuses Garda of neglect in missing teen case. The coverage stirred dormant memory. Neighbors called into radio programs, recalling details from that autumn in 2003. Most accounts were vague: rainy night, posters everywhere. But one man phoned to say he remembered seeing a figure near the bus stop, pacing. His recollection matched the overlooked witness statement. Then the letters began. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slid under the Kellehers' door. The paper was ruled, the ink a dark blue that bled faintly at the edges. The handwriting trembled, uneven, as if written in haste or under strain. No salutation, no name. Just a message. You looked in the wrong place. She is below, where doors stay shut. At the bottom, drawn in crude lines, was the outline of a key. The family froze at the table. The page spread between them. Fiona's mother placed it in a clear plastic sleeve, refusing to touch the ink directly. Her father logged the date and time received, the envelope's postmark missing because it had not been mailed. They took the letter to the Garda station. An officer accepted it but wrote only a one-line note in the log. Received anonymous correspondence, placed in file. No handwriting expert was assigned, no forensic test ordered. The family demanded more, but the officer shrugged. So they arranged their own examination. A retired document analyst, contacted through a journalist, reviewed the note. He compared letter forms, spacing, pen pressure. His report was careful. Likely written with standard Bic pen, dark blue ink, manufactured widely. No immediate matches. Hand tremor inconsistent. Could be disguise, could be age. The family pinned the letter to their wall beside the maps. The crude key drawing aligned eerily with the sketches they had made years earlier. 2 months later, a second letter arrived, this time through the post. The envelope bore no return address, the stamp Irish, the postmark smudged. The paper again lined, again in blue ink. The message read, "Closer now. Think of doors sealed and what was left beneath." At the corner, another key, drawn slightly different, its teeth jagged. The family sensed direction. Doors sealed became their focus. They combed through their maps for old warehouses, shuttered basements, condemned buildings. They wrote lists of addresses, cross-referencing property records. Journalists amplified the mystery. Articles printed excerpts from the first note, blurred the key drawing, and questioned why authorities ignored potential leads. The Gardaí issued a statement dismissing the letters as hoaxes, but the family pressed on. They photocopied the notes, filed them, and placed originals in protective sleeves. Fiona's brother redrew the keys on tracing paper, layering them over maps of the neighborhood. Some lines aligned with alleyways, others with the grid of streets. It became a ritual, a nightly exercise in decoding. The letters offered no closure, only compulsion. Yet for the first time in years, the family felt movement. The letter ended with a crude sketch of a key. The second letter shifted the family's search into motion. Its words, "Doors sealed, what was left beneath," refused to loosen their grip. Fiona's father enlarged the photocopy on a shop machine until the ink strokes filled half a page. He taped it above the kitchen table. Every meal, every conversation happened beneath that jagged outline of a key. In late autumn 2008, Fiona's brother received a call from a classmate who had read about the letters in the paper. The classmate mentioned an old property near the North Wall Quay, long abandoned after storm damage in the 1980s. "It still has padlocks on the doors," the man said. The detail was logged into the family's spiral notebook. North Wall Quay, derelict warehouse, doors sealed. A week later, they went. The building stood in shadow beside the river, windows shattered, walls streaked with mildew. Corrugated sheets clung loosely to frames, rattling in the wind. A volunteer brought a camera, recording each step. At the entrance, a rusted padlock hung from a bent latch. Fiona's father bent low, studying it with a flashlight. The keyhole was clogged with dirt, the metal swollen from rain. He photographed it, then photographed the outline of a key traced on the letter. The resemblance was unsettling. Inside, the floor was cracked concrete, weeds sprouting through fissures. Dust clung to every surface. They moved cautiously, each footstep leaving prints in the gray film. A search log dated October 21, 2008 recorded, "Warehouse, north wall key. Entry gained through side door. Interior empty. Evidence: padlock photographed, floor cracks photographed." The group spread out, flashlights sweeping. They noted scuff marks near the rear wall, as if something had once been dragged, but no objects remained. Still, the place breathed of secrecy. They stayed 2 hours, documenting. Fiona's brother sketched the interior, marking cracks, doorways, stains. His drawing included the padlock, circled, with the word key scrawled beside it. The Gardaí received the report but dismissed it. "Old building," the officer said. "Not relevant." The family added his remark to their notebook verbatim. Then, in November, a third letter arrived. Again, blue ink, again, the trembling hand. This one was shorter, harsher. "You stand above, but never below. The lock is not the last." At the bottom corner, another key, this one drawn with exaggerated teeth. The family's interpretation shifted. The letters were not pointing to a single warehouse, but to a series of places, doors that concealed deeper ground. They began marking cellars on their maps. Old pubs, townhouses, storage basements long disused. One night, Fiona's father returned to the first warehouse and crouched by the padlock again. He lifted it, turned it in his hand, felt the weight. A volunteer photographed the gesture. That image later sat on their kitchen wall too, beside the letter, evidence of pursuit. Their file thickened. The warehouse search produced 15 photographs, 3 sketches, and the recorded log. The padlock was the only object resembling a lead, though no key was ever found. The crude sketches of keys continued to multiply, each one different, each one hinting at an opening still ahead. On the cracked floor, a rusted padlock lay. The padlock photographs circulated among the volunteers, each person offering theories, but it was Fiona's mother who suggested testing the letters themselves. "If they won't check," she said, "we will." Through a journalist contact, they located a private laboratory outside Dublin that specialized in questioned documents. In January 2009, the family delivered the envelopes in a sealed folder. The lab logged them under case code KEL09, noting condition, paper ruled, blue ink, folds consistent with hand delivery and postal transit. Analysis began with ink comparison. Under infrared light, the Bic pen's dye fluoresced faintly. The chemist noted the formula had been discontinued from mass retail in the late 1990s, though residual stock persisted into the early 2000s. The paper itself carried a watermark, faint, partial, shaped like a key's silhouette. The mark identified the stock as manufactured in a mill closed since 1990. The report was clinical, 4 pages, stamped and signed. Its conclusion: source paper predates event by over a decade. Ink formula older than current market, likely acquired from old stock or concealed supply. The Kellehers read the words in silence. It meant whoever sent the letters was not improvising with common stationery. The choices were deliberate, calculated, perhaps meant to disorient. They added the report to their growing evidence binders. Fiona's father filed copies in plastic sleeves. Fiona's brother pinned the page with the watermark description to the kitchen wall, circling the phrase outline of a key. The symbolic object that had stalked them since 2003 returned with force. Not only was the drawing of a key repeated in every letter, but now the very paper carried its faint impression, a detail invisible until revealed by laboratory light. The Gardaí showed no interest. When the family presented the report, the officer on duty said, "Plenty of paper has marks, doesn't mean anything." The comment was logged, dated, timed. At home, the family cataloged the padlock photographs, the cracked warehouse floor, the trembling handwriting, the watermark. They drew lines between them on their wall map, a private forensic board more thorough than the official file. Meanwhile, another letter arrived. This one lacked words entirely. It contained only a single sketch, drawn darker, the teeth of the key jagged like saw edges. The back of the page bore an oily fingerprint smudge. The family sealed it immediately, noting the print's location. They stored it flat between acetate sheets. The laboratory later reported the fingerprint too smudged for comparison. Still, the residue remained a trace, another fragment unacknowledged by Garda records. The effect on the family was corrosive yet galvanizing. Each new fragment deepened the weight of absence, but also the determination to continue. The nightly ritual intensified. They spread maps, pinned sketches, taped photocopies. The kitchen wall became a patchwork of keys, padlocks, outlines, fragments. The watermark was a faint outline of a key. By 2010, the investigation had effectively split into two worlds. The Gardaí kept their file dormant, referencing no credible leads. In contrast, the Kelleher family's private archive filled 3 binders, 2 crates of maps, and a wall layered with taped letters and sketches. That spring, Fiona's cousin, attending university in Galway, opened her dorm mailbox to find a plain envelope with no return address. Inside, a sheet of ruled paper, folded twice. The message: "Blood remembers. Look east of the river. Doors below wait still." At the corner, a key again, its outline sharper, drawn with heavier ink. The cousin phoned immediately. The family drove west the same night, retrieved the letter, and logged it. Postmark: Dublin Central Facility, date indistinct. They plotted the phrase, "east of the river," onto their maps. The search narrowed to old residential blocks near East Wall, an area of derelict properties awaiting demolition. By July, they walked the streets with flashlights, volunteers marking addresses. One structure stood out: a boarded townhouse, its windows nailed, its door welded shut with rusted plates. Records showed it had been condemned since 1987 after fire damage. They returned in daylight, photographing the facade, the welds, the padlock on the side gate. Fiona's brother sketched it into his notebook. At the bottom margin, he drew the crude key once more, aligning the outline to the lock. Through a gap in the boards, they glimpsed a stairwell descending beneath the house. Dust shifted in the beam of light, settling on concrete steps. The family called Garda headquarters again, urging excavation. The officer recorded the request, then added, "Area unsafe, no action planned." So the relatives documented themselves. On August 14, 2010, they filed a private search log. Location: East Wall condemned property. Exterior surveyed. Sub-level stairwell visible. Access obstructed by welded plates. 3 signatures closed the entry. The letters had led them to a threshold, yet the door remained sealed. At night, Fiona's father stared at the photograph of the welds. He circled the hinge, wrote beside it, "If unlocked, what then?" The answer remained hidden behind rust and silence. Beneath the soil, iron hinges resisted daylight. The condemned house at East Wall became an obsession. Every weekend, the Kellehers returned with volunteers, documenting changes in the exterior, checking if boards shifted, if welds weakened. Neighbors watched quietly, some sympathetic, others uneasy. In September 2010, Fiona's father contacted a contractor he once knew from his days as a dock worker. The man brought a portable drill rig used for soil testing. On a Sunday morning, while the street remained empty, they positioned the rig against the side yard and began boring into the ground. The machine whined, chewing through compacted soil. Cylindrical samples rose in segments, lifted into plastic bags, sealed, labeled with tape. Each borehole revealed stratified layers: gravel, clay, brick fragments, until at 3 meters depth, the drill struck hollow space. The contractor noted the resistance change. His log read, "Depth 3.1 mm, void detected, possible substructure." The entry was dated and initialed. The family carried the bags home, stacking them carefully in the garage. Soil clung to plastic, streaking it brown and gray. Fiona's brother labeled each sample with time and depth, numbering them in sequence. At night, they studied the drill logs. A cellar, sealed beneath years of soil and concrete, likely remained intact. The Gardaí refused permission for excavation. Private tampering could contaminate evidence, the officer said, though no evidence had ever been pursued. The statement was written word for word in the family's spiral notebook, so the Kellehers pressed further. They borrowed hand tools, chisels, crowbars. On October 9, 2010, they pried at the side door, hammering at rusted plates. Sparks leapt, metal groaned. Finally, a portion of weld gave way, revealing the edge of a stairwell. Air pushed upward, stale, metallic, carrying the scent of mold. A narrow concrete staircase descended into black. Their flashlights caught edges, chipped steps, spiderwebs, the glint of something reflective below. They stopped, breathing heavily. Fiona's father photographed the stairwell, the jagged welds, the dark mouth below. Each image was time-stamped. Back at the kitchen table, they laid the photographs beside the letters. The words, "Doors below wait," still aligned too neatly. The object that had followed them for 7 years returned again. Fiona's house keys, still sealed in Garda storage, had never been tested. The family borrowed a set of old spare keys from relatives, tried them against the rusted lock. None fit. The padlock resisted, swollen with corrosion. The cellar remained closed, but now it was real. No longer rumor, no longer metaphor. The staircase descended into airless dark. October 16, 2010. The Kelleher family returned with volunteers and crowbars. They widened the opening at the east wall property, breaking through rusted welds until the doorframe cracked loose. Inside, flashlights illuminated a descending staircase. The air pressed thick, stagnant, unmoved for decades. Each step left dust imprints behind their shoes. The stairwell ended in a concrete chamber. The walls bled moisture, paint peeling in strips, fungi tracing dark veins along the surface. A broken chair lay on its side. 2 bottles, glass clouded by age, rested in corners. Against one wall, a heap of rotted cloth slumped, indistinguishable until examined closely. A volunteer bent down, lifted fabric with gloved hands. Threads disintegrated under touch, but beneath lay the rusted skeleton of buttons, a cracked shoe sole, fragments of denim. A heavier piece, still intact enough to hold form, revealed itself as a jacket sleeve. The discovery froze the room. Fiona's father photographed each fragment in sequence. His notes read, "Cloth fragment, blue. Buttons, 3. Brass. Shoe sole, left, size uncertain. Location, east wall, base of chamber, near the center of the floor." They uncovered brittle bones. At first, only small fragments, phalanges, ribs, but soon enough, longer remains, unmistakably human. Silence overtook the group. The volunteers withdrew, some whispering prayers. The family did not speak. They documented. Photographs, sketches, positions. Each item was placed into plastic bags, sealed, labeled. On October 18th, they delivered the evidence to a private pathologist. DNA swabs were taken from bone fragments, sealed with tamper-proof tape, logged under sample codes KEL-DNA1 through KAL-DNA6. Weeks later, results returned. Mitochondrial DNA matched Fiona's maternal line. Probability, 99.98%. The report's language was cold, precise, but to the Kellehers, it was confirmation. Fiona's remains had been found. The Gardaí could no longer ignore the case. A press release announced, "Partial remains recovered. Case reopened." Yet the statement omitted who had recovered them, omitting the family's role. Still, the truth advanced. Among the debris, one detail lodged itself in memory. A small wooden box, splintered, lying beside the jacket sleeve. Empty, save for a rust stain where metal once pressed against wood. Inside the stain's outline, the shape was unmistakable, the contour of a key. The DNA swabbed from cloth matched Fiona. The Gardaí reopened the file, but the balance of control had shifted. What began as a dismissal in 2003 now stood as an indictment of their neglect. Forensic teams entered the East Wall property under court order, but they arrived after the family had already logged, photographed, and archived the first findings. The official excavation widened the cellar. Floodlights illuminated damp walls, evidence technicians combing the chamber with brushes and sifters. They collected soil, vacuumed dust, photographed every surface. In the far corner, they recovered hair fragments preserved in a crack between floor slabs. Under microscopic examination, mitochondrial DNA matched Fiona's earlier profile. Attention turned to the anonymous letters. At the family's insistence, they were finally sent to handwriting experts at Garda Technical Bureau. The slanted script, trembling strokes, and repetitive phrasing were compared against samples from prior investigations. One match surfaced. A man named Patrick Doyle, mid-40s in 2003, once employed as a handyman in the Kelleher's neighborhood. He had a minor criminal record for trespassing and theft. More damning, property records showed Doyle rented the East Wall townhouse briefly in the late 1980s, before the fire that condemned it. His name appeared in utility records, gas, electricity, before service terminated in 1987. The Gardaí interrogated him in 2011. Confronted with the handwriting comparison, he denied authorship. Yet tool marks on the cellar welds were matched to welding equipment he had once registered for repair work. The crude padlock photographs from the warehouse search were compared to receipts for bulk hardware Doyle had purchased in 1990. The family followed every update through journalists, keeping their own notes as the investigation finally took shape. Forensic anchors multiplied: handwriting charts, property deeds, gas invoices, tool repair tickets, all pointed in a single direction. Then came the decisive link. The wooden box found in the cellar, photographed by the family, carried faint traces of iron oxide. Forensic testing reconstructed its prior contents. The outline matched a skeleton key, corroded beyond recovery. Garda investigators searched Doyle's former workshop. Hidden in a toolbox was a matching key blank, never cut, coated in the same oxide. The symbolism that had stalked the family for years, the crude sketches, the watermark, the padlock, now converged. The key was no longer metaphor. It was literal, tied to Doyle's past, tied to the cellar itself. At a press briefing, the Gardaí acknowledged the breakthrough but omitted mention of the family's role in uncovering the cellar. The omission was glaring. Still, the narrative shifted, from runaway to cold case to homicide. The family sat in the courtroom gallery as Doyle was formally charged with unlawful imprisonment, murder, and concealment of a body. The evidence list ran 5 pages long. At item 47, photographed and enlarged for the jury, was the iron outline from the wooden box. The key fit his cellar door. The trial began in 2012 at Dublin's Central Criminal Court. The Kelleher family filled the first row of benches, binders of their own evidence stacked discreetly at their feet. Reporters lined the back, notebooks ready. The prosecution opened with a timeline. Fiona vanished October 14, 2003. The Gardaí treated her case as voluntary absence. Years later, her relatives uncovered evidence, letters, maps, and ultimately, the cellar. Their persistence forced the case open. Exhibits rolled forward one by one. First, the satchel, books still inside, water bottle collapsed, keys sealed in plastic. Then the anonymous letters. Enlarged copies were projected for the jury. The trembling blue ink, the crude sketches of keys, the phrases that had guided the family into darkness. A handwriting expert testified. He outlined loops, angles, pen pressure, comparing each to samples taken from Patrick Doyle. High probability of common authorship, his report concluded. Next came the forensic pathologist. She described the DNA swabs from cloth and bone fragments, the match to Fiona's maternal line. Her words were flat, clinical, yet the weight of probability, 99.98%, landed hard in the room. Tool mark analysts followed. They matched the welds on the sealed cellar door to equipment Doyle had once registered. Invoices were displayed. Repair services dated 1990, receipts bearing his name, then the wooden box. The prosecution introduced photographs taken by the family, the outline of a key etched in rust. The jury leaned forward as a forensic chemist explained oxide transfer, how the residue matched the key blank recovered from Doyle's old workshop. The courtroom fell silent as the exhibit was placed on a velvet cloth. Fiona's house keys, tagged and bagged since 2003, laid beside the corroded outline from the box. The prosecutor spoke only once. One key never opened her door again, because another locked her away. Doyle sat expressionless. His solicitor objected repeatedly, citing chain of custody breaches, claiming contamination from the family's involvement. But the judge allowed the exhibits. The court acknowledged irregularities, but the evidence was overwhelming. Reporters' pens scraped furiously. Headlines the next day captured the drama. Family's pursuit brings hidden cellar evidence to light. Through it all, the Kellehers remained composed. They had insisted their daughter's name not dissolve into rumor. Now, her absence carried the weight of evidence, the formality of testimony, the gravity of exhibits, and at the center of it all lay one object, ordinary yet damning. The jury stared at one key on velvet cloth. Verdict day arrived under gray skies. Rain streaked the courthouse windows, pooling on the stone steps where journalists crowded with cameras. Inside, the Kelleher family sat shoulder to shoulder, hands folded, eyes fixed on the bench. The jury filed in after 3 days of deliberation. The foreman's words carried no hesitation, guilty on all counts. Patrick Doyle was sentenced to life imprisonment, the maximum term under Irish law. His face betrayed no reaction, but in the gallery, Fiona's mother exhaled for the first time in years. The judge's remarks were precise. He condemned the unacceptable deficiencies in the original Garda investigation. Though not formally censured, the implication was clear. The system had failed. Justice had emerged only because a family refused silence. After sentencing, courtroom exhibits were logged into permanent archive. Fiona's satchel, her textbooks brittle with age, her water bottle collapsed, her house keys still sealed in their bag. The anonymous letters, each with crude sketches, were cataloged and boxed. The wooden box fragment, stained with the outline of a corroded key, was filed under Exhibit 47. The Kellehers walked out into rain. Cameras flashed. Statements were brief. She is no longer missing. She is found. That is enough. In the weeks that followed, articles dissected the case, questioning systemic neglect. Opinion columns called for reform of missing persons protocols, mandatory canvassing orders, stricter evidence handling. Politicians promised reviews, but for the family, reform was secondary. What mattered was that their daughter's story no longer ended in silence. At home, the kitchen wall was cleared. Maps came down, letters removed, pins unfastened. Only one item remained. A photograph of Fiona smiling in school uniform, taped beside a plastic sleeve holding the first anonymous letter. In the Garda evidence vault, a clerk sealed the final box. Inside, among paper, metal, and cloth, lay the object that had stalked the case for 9 years. Fiona's keys, once ordinary, now historical. The case file closed with a single key sealed.